Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Facts channel. I'm so glad you found your way here. Maybe you had a long day. Or maybe you're the kind of person who likes falling asleep to coastal mysteries rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your body grow light as if floating on your back in gentle waves. Because tonight, we're exploring sea otters, those playful creatures who wrap themselves in kelp and crack open shells on their bellies. We'll drift from their remarkable fur to their clever use of tools, discovering animals who hold hands while sleeping and build rafts in the open water. Some of what you hear tonight may surprise you, or at least spark curiosity as you drift off. Before we begin, if this helps you unwind, consider liking and subscribing, one sleepy soul at a time. Now, let's begin. The sea otter is one of the smallest marine mammals in the world, yet it carries one of the densest fur coats of any animal on Earth. While whales and seals rely on thick layers of blubber to stay warm in cold ocean waters, the sea otter depends almost entirely on its fur for insulation. This fur is so dense that water rarely reaches the otter's skin, creating an insulating layer of trapped air that keeps the animal warm even in frigid seas. Each square inch of a sea otter's pelt contains about 1 million individual hairs, more than the total number of hairs on an entire human head. This extraordinary density creates a coat so thick and luxurious that it feels like the softest velvet imaginable. The fur consists of 2 layers: long guard hairs that repel water and a dense undercoat that traps air. Together, these layers create a barrier against the cold that allows sea otters to thrive in waters where temperatures hover just above freezing. The otter spends hours each day grooming this precious fur, blowing air into it and combing through it with its paws to maintain the air layer that keeps it alive. Sea otters live along the northern Pacific coasts, from central California up through Alaska and across to Russia and Japan. They prefer shallow coastal waters where kelp forests grow thick and food is abundant. Unlike their river otter cousins who move between land and water, sea otters spend nearly their entire lives in the ocean, rarely if ever coming ashore. They sleep, eat, groom, and raise their young while floating on the surface or diving to the seafloor. Their range once extended much further, covering most of the northern Pacific Rim, but hunting in the 18th and 19th centuries reduced their numbers dramatically. Today, their distribution is fragmented, with populations separated by hundreds of miles of empty coastline. These remaining populations cling to protected areas, where kelp forests provide both food and shelter from storms and predators. The otters are most commonly found in waters no deeper than about 40 meters, where they can dive to the bottom to search for food and return to the surface without exhausting themselves. The sea otter's body is perfectly adapted for life in cold water, with a long, streamlined shape that tapers from broad shoulders to a muscular tail. The hind feet are large and flipper-like, webbed for powerful swimming, while the front paws are smaller and more delicate, perfect for the intricate work of handling food and grooming fur. The otter's face is round and whiskered, with small ears that close when diving and dark eyes that shine with intelligence and curiosity. Adult males grow larger than females, sometimes reaching lengths of nearly 5 feet from nose to tail tip and weighing up to 100 pounds, though most are considerably smaller. Despite their bulk, sea otters move through water with remarkable grace, rolling and spinning and diving with movements that seem almost choreographed. On the rare occasions when they come ashore, however, they are awkward and ungainly, their bodies so well adapted to water that land becomes uncomfortable and difficult to navigate. Sea otters have the highest metabolic rate of any mammal, burning through calories at an astonishing pace to maintain their body temperature. Without blubber for insulation, the otter must generate heat constantly through metabolism, which requires consuming enormous amounts of food. An adult sea otter eats roughly 25% of its body weight every single day, spending much of its waking life searching for, capturing, and consuming prey. This relentless need for food drives nearly all of the otter's behavior, from where it chooses to rest to how it organizes its daily activities. The otter's metabolism works so intensely that it must eat almost continuously during daylight hours, diving again and again to collect food from the ocean floor. This high-energy lifestyle means that sea otters are always just a few days away from starvation if food becomes scarce. They have no reserves to draw upon, no thick fat layer to sustain them through lean times. Each day brings a fresh challenge to consume enough calories to survive another night in the cold embrace of the sea. The sea otter uses tools more regularly and skillfully than almost any other animal besides humans and primates. When an otter finds a clam, mussel, or sea urchin with a hard shell, it also collects a rock from the seafloor. Rising to the surface, the otter floats on its back and places the rock on its chest like an anvil. Then, holding the shellfish in both paws, it strikes the shell against the rock repeatedly until the shell cracks open, revealing the soft flesh inside. This behavior requires planning, problem-solving, and manual dexterity, demonstrating cognitive abilities that scientists once thought were unique to primates. Individual otters develop preferences for particular rocks, sometimes carrying a favorite tool in the loose skin pouch under their forearm as they dive for more food. These rocks become worn smooth with use, shaped by thousands of impacts over weeks or months. Young otters learn tool use by watching their mothers, practicing the technique with empty shells before graduating to real prey. The sight of a sea otter floating peacefully on the waves while methodically cracking open a shell is one of nature's most charming tableaux. A reminder that intelligence and resourcefulness come in many forms. Sea otters often wrap themselves in kelp before settling down to rest or sleep. The long strands of giant kelp that grow from the seafloor to the surface provide natural anchor lines that keep the otter from drifting away on currents and wind. The otter wraps several strands of kelp around its body, creating a tether that holds it in place while allowing enough freedom to move and adjust position. This kelp wrapping behavior is particularly common in areas with strong currents, or when otters rest in the open ocean, away from protected bays. The kelp not only prevents drifting but also provides a sense of security, a connection to the solid earth far below. Baby otters, which cannot yet dive or swim well, are often wrapped extra securely by their mothers, who bundle them in kelp while leaving to hunt for food. The pup waits patiently, bobbing in its kelp cradle, until the mother returns. This use of kelp as a natural mooring demonstrates the otter's intimate understanding of its environment and its ability to use available resources in creative ways. Sea otters float on their backs while eating, sleeping, and grooming, a posture that has become their signature pose. This upside-down floating is made possible by the air trapped in their fur, which provides buoyancy and keeps them at the surface without effort. The otter's chest becomes a dinner table where it places captured prey, working to open shells and remove flesh, while waves rock it gently back and forth. When sleeping, otters often cover their eyes with their paws, as if shielding themselves from bright sunlight. Though the gesture seems more about comfort than necessity, groups of resting otters sometimes hold hands or paws, linking themselves together so they don't drift apart while sleeping. These rafts of otters, as the groups are called, can include just a few individuals, or dozens, all floating together in companionable proximity. The sight of sleeping otters holding hands while bobbing on the ocean surface has captured human hearts around the world, becoming an emblem of trust, community, and peaceful coexistence. This behavior serves a practical purpose, keeping family groups together and reducing the risk of solitary individuals drifting into dangerous waters, but it also speaks to the social nature of these animals and their need for connection. The sea otter's whiskers are long, sensitive organs that help the animal navigate and hunt in dark or murky waters. These vibrissae, as they are scientifically known, can detect subtle changes in water movement, allowing the otter to sense the presence of prey hiding in crevices or buried under sand. When diving in dim light or at night, the otter relies heavily on its whiskers to find food. sweeping its muzzle across the seafloor and feeling for the distinctive vibrations that indicate a clam or crab nearby. The whiskers are also used to examine captured prey, helping the otter determine the best way to open a shell or whether a particular item is worth eating. Each whisker connects to a sensitive nerve cluster in the otter's face, transmitting detailed tactile information to the brain. This sensory system supplements the otter's good eyesight, creating a complete picture of the underwater environment even when visibility is poor. The whiskers fan out from the otter's muzzle in an elegant array, constantly quivering and twitching as they sample the water, gathering data that guides the animal's movements and decisions. Sea otters are surprisingly vocal animals, producing a range of sounds that serve various social and communicative functions. Mothers and pups call to each other with high-pitched cries that carry across the water, helping them reunite if separated. Adult otters make huffing, chittering, and cooing sounds during social interactions, expressing emotions and intentions to their companions. When distressed or threatened, an otter may produce loud screams or whistles that alert nearby individuals to danger. These vocalizations are part of a complex communication system that also includes body language, scent marking, and physical contact. Young otters are particularly noisy, calling frequently to their mothers and vocalizing during play sessions with other pups. The sounds of sea otters carry well across the water surface, allowing individuals to stay in contact even when separated by considerable distances. On a quiet morning in sea otter habitat, you might hear their voices drifting across the waves, a chorus of squeaks and coos that adds an auditory dimension to their already captivating presence. The sea otter's paws are remarkably dexterous, with leathery pads and retractable claws that function almost like fingers. The front paws are used for grooming, manipulating food, and handling tools, performing tasks that require precision and control. An otter can pick up a tiny pebble, feel a clamshell for weak points, or delicately pluck a sea urchin from a rocky crevice. The hind feet, by contrast, are built for propulsion, with webbing that extends to the tips of the toes, creating broad paddles that drive the otter through water with powerful kicks. When swimming at speed, the otter holds its front paws against its chest and propels itself entirely with its hind feet and tail, achieving surprising velocity when necessary. The combination of dexterous front paws and powerful hind feet gives the sea otter versatility, allowing it to be both a skilled forager and a capable swimmer. This division of labor between front and hind limbs represents an elegant evolutionary solution to the challenge of thriving in a demanding marine environment. Sea otters dive to the seafloor to hunt for food, holding their breath for several minutes at a time while searching for prey. A typical dive lasts between 1 and 3 minutes, though otters can stay submerged for up to 5 minutes if necessary. The depth of these dives varies depending on local conditions, but most occur in relatively shallow water, where prey is accessible and dive times are manageable. The otter descends by tucking its front paws against its body and pumping its hind feet, moving downward in a smooth, efficient motion. On the seafloor, it uses its paws and whiskers to search for food, flipping rocks, digging in sediment, and probing into crevices. When the otter finds prey, it tucks the food into its armpit pouch or grasps it in its paws before returning to the surface. The ascent is usually faster than the descent, powered by strong kicks that propel the otter upward through the water column. Upon reaching the surface, the otter immediately positions itself on its back to begin the work of opening and eating its catch, all while floating gently on the waves. The diet of a sea otter consists primarily of invertebrates that live on or near the seafloor. Sea urchins are among their favorite prey, along with various species of clams, mussels, crabs, and snails. Otters also consume abalone, octopuses, and slow-moving fish when available. This diet is rich in protein and provides the calories necessary to fuel the otter's demanding metabolism. Different otters develop individual preferences, with some specializing in certain types of prey, while others maintain a more varied diet. These preferences are learned from mothers and refined through experience. with each otter becoming an expert in finding and processing its preferred foods. The otter's impact on prey populations can be substantial, particularly for sea urchins, which the otters consume in large numbers. In areas where sea otters are abundant, urchin populations are kept in check, allowing kelp forests to flourish. Where otters are absent, urchins can multiply unchecked, sometimes grazing kelp forests down to barren rock. This relationship between otters, urchins, and kelp has made the sea otter a keystone species, an animal whose presence shapes the entire ecosystem. Sea otters have been observed using multiple tools during a single foraging session, demonstrating flexibility and innovation in their hunting techniques. An otter might use one rock to dislodge an abalone from a reef, then carry that abalone and a different rock to the surface, where the second rock serves as an anvil for opening the shell. Some otters learn to use tools in ways their mothers never taught them, inventing new techniques through trial and error. This capacity for innovation suggests that sea otter intelligence extends beyond simple imitation to include problem-solving and creative thinking. The variation in tool use among individuals and populations indicates that otter culture may exist, learned behaviors that are passed down through generations and that vary between different groups. A sea otter population in one area might have techniques and traditions that differ from those practiced by otters elsewhere, each group developing its own solutions to local challenges. The sea otter's eyes are well adapted for seeing both above and below the water surface, a necessary ability for an animal that lives at the boundary between two worlds. The eyes can adjust to different light levels and can focus in both air and water, though underwater vision is somewhat blurred. The otter relies more heavily on its whiskers than its eyes when hunting in murky conditions or at depth. But vision remains important for navigating, identifying distant objects, and watching for predators. The eyes are dark and expressive, seeming to convey emotion and personality in ways that humans find endearing. When an otter floats on its back and looks up at the sky, or when it turns to gaze at a passing boat, its eyes create a sense of connection, a bridge between human observer and wild animal. This emotional resonance has made sea otters popular subjects for photography and film, their faces capturing hearts and inspiring conservation efforts that have brought them back from the brink of extinction. Sea otters maintain their fur through constant grooming, a behavior so important that it occupies several hours of each day. The otter uses its paws to rub and comb through its fur, distributing natural oils from skin glands and removing any debris or tangles. It blows air into the fur from its mouth, creating bubbles that travel through the coat and replenish the insulating air layer. The otter rolls and tumbles in the water during grooming sessions, reaching every part of its body to ensure complete coverage. This meticulous maintenance is not optional. A sea otter with matted or dirty fur will quickly lose body heat and can die from hypothermia even in relatively warm water. Oil spills pose a catastrophic threat to sea otters, precisely because oil destroys the fur's insulating properties, causing otters to freeze even as they frantically try to clean themselves. The grooming behavior is instinctive but is also refined through learning, with young otters watching and mimicking their mothers until they master the techniques necessary for survival. The sea otter's tail is thick and muscular, serving as both a rudder for steering and a propulsive aid during swimming. When the otter swims rapidly, the tail undulates from side to side, supplementing the power provided by the hind feet. The tail also helps the otter maintain balance when floating on its back, acting as a stabilizer that prevents rolling. During grooming, the otter can bring its tail forward and work on it with its paws, ensuring that every part of its body receives attention. The tail is densely furred like the rest of the body, contributing to the otter's overall insulation. The thickness of the tail gives it substantial mass, which helps the otter adjust its position in the water and contributes to the rolling, playful movements that characterize otter behavior. Like every aspect of the sea otter's anatomy, the tail represents a finely tuned adaptation to marine life. One more piece of an evolutionary puzzle that has produced one of the ocean's most remarkable inhabitants. Sea otters give birth to a single pup after a gestation period of about 6 months, though the timing can be delayed through a process called delayed implantation. This process allows the mother to time the birth so that the pup arrives when conditions are most favorable for survival. The newborn pup is remarkably large for the mother's size, weighing about 4 or 5 pounds, and is born with its eyes open and a full coat of fluffy fur. This natal fur is different from adult fur. It is lighter in color and so buoyant that the pup cannot dive, forcing it to remain on the surface while its mother hunts. The pup is entirely dependent on its mother for the first several months of life, nursing frequently and learning the skills it will need to survive. The mother carries her pup on her chest while swimming, grooming it constantly to keep its fur clean and dry. She also teaches it to swim, groom, and eventually to dive and forage. The bond between mother and pup is intense, and mother otters show remarkable dedication to their offspring, often going hungry themselves to ensure their pup is well fed. The fluffy fur of a newborn sea otter pup serves as a life jacket, keeping the youngster afloat while its mother dives for food. This baby fur is so buoyant that even if the pup wanted to dive, it simply could not overcome the upward force, keeping it at the surface. The mother takes advantage of this buoyancy, wrapping her pup in kelp when she needs to leave it for extended periods. The pup bobs on the surface like a cork, calling out occasionally but otherwise waiting patiently for its mother to return. Over the first few months of life, the pup's fur gradually transforms, losing its extreme buoyancy as adult fur grows in. This transition marks an important developmental milestone, as the pup begins learning to dive and eventually to hunt for itself. The timing of this change is critical. The pup must learn diving skills before it loses its mother's constant care, but not so early that it risks drowning before it has mastered the necessary techniques. Sea otters are known to use their chest as a storage pouch, tucking small rocks, favorite tools, or even food items into the loose skin under their forearms while they dive for more. This anatomical feature, a flap of skin that forms a pocket, allows the otter to carry multiple items at once, making foraging more efficient. An otter might collect several clams on a single dive, storing them in its armpit pouches along with a good pounding rock, then return to the surface where all the collected items can be processed in succession. This adaptation demonstrates the evolutionary pressure toward efficiency in an animal that must constantly gather food to meet its metabolic needs. The pouch is flexible and expansive, capable of holding a surprising volume of material without interfering with the otter's swimming. Young otters sometimes play with their pouches, practicing storage techniques with empty shells or pebbles, developing the muscle control and coordination they will need as adults. Sea otters communicate through scent, as well as sound and body language, using scent glands to mark their presence and convey information to other otters. The exact nature of sea otter chemical communication is not fully understood, but researchers know that otters can distinguish individuals by scent and may use smell to identify potential mates or rivals. Grooming behavior likely spreads scent across the fur, creating a signature that other otters can detect. The water itself carries scent information, with currents and tides distributing chemical signals across the otter's habitat. This chemical dimension of otter communication operates beneath the surface of human perception, a hidden language that we can only infer through careful observation and experimentation. The richness of sea otter communication, combining vocalizations, visual displays, tactile contact, and chemical signals, reflects the complexity of their social lives and the importance of information exchange in maintaining group cohesion. The sea otter's heart beats rapidly compared to larger marine mammals, pumping blood quickly through a body that demands constant oxygen and nutrient delivery. This fast heart rate supports the otter's high metabolism, ensuring that every tissue receives the fuel it needs to generate heat and power movement. The circulatory system includes adaptations that help conserve heat, with blood vessels arranged to transfer warmth from outgoing arterial blood to incoming venous blood, reducing heat loss to the environment. This countercurrent heat exchange occurs primarily in the limbs, where surface area is large and heat loss is most problematic. The arrangement ensures that warm blood traveling to the pores preheats cold blood returning from the pores, maintaining core body temperature even when the extremities are exposed to frigid water. These circulatory adaptations work in concert with the fur's insulation to create a comprehensive thermal management system that allows the sea otter to maintain a constant body temperature in conditions that would quickly kill an unprotected mammal. Sea otters exhibit play behavior throughout their lives, not just during youth. Adult otters are frequently seen rolling, spinning, and tossing objects in ways that serve no obvious survival function, but seem to bring enjoyment. This playfulness may help maintain physical fitness, practice important motor skills, or simply provide mental stimulation that enhances well-being. Young otters play extensively with their mothers, siblings, and other pups, engaging in games of chase, wrestling matches, and object manipulation. These play sessions help develop coordination, strength, and social skills that will be important in adult life. The playful nature of sea otters has endeared them to humans, who recognize in otter behavior something familiar: the joy of movement, the pleasure of interaction, the satisfaction of mastering a new skill. This capacity for play suggests that sea otters experience emotions beyond simple survival instincts, that they have an inner life characterized by positive and negative feelings, preferences and aversions, pleasure and frustration. The sea otter's digestive system processes food quickly and efficiently, extracting nutrients from shellfish, flesh, and other prey items before expelling waste. The rapid digestion is necessary because the otter must eat so frequently there is simply no time for a leisurely digestive process when the next meal must be acquired within hours. The stomach and intestines are relatively short compared to herbivorous mammals, reflecting a diet of easily digestible animal protein rather than tough plant material. Waste products are expelled frequently, both feces and urine, adding nutrients to the coastal waters where otters live. These nutrients support phytoplankton growth, which in turn supports the entire food web. In this way, sea otters participate in nutrient cycling, linking the seafloor where they hunt to the water column where primary production occurs. The otter's role extends beyond simply eating urchins and clams. It helps drive the ecological processes that maintain healthy coastal ecosystems. Sea otters are one of the few marine mammals capable of living their entire lives without ever coming onto land. While seals and sea lions haul out regularly to rest, mate, and give birth, sea otters accomplish all of these activities while floating at sea. This complete marine lifestyle places unique demands on the otter's physiology and behavior, requiring adaptations that allow for sleeping on water, giving birth at sea, and maintaining warmth, without the option of basking in sunshine on a warm rock. The otter's air-filled fur provides buoyancy that makes floating effortless, and its high metabolism generates warmth that replaces the heat that land animals absorb from their surroundings. This commitment to marine life distinguishes sea otters from river otters and from most other marine mammals, making them uniquely adapted to the coastal ocean environment they call home. The population of sea otters was once much larger than it is today, with hundreds of thousands of animals ranging across the northern Pacific. Beginning in the 18th century, fur traders hunted sea otters intensively for their luxurious pelts, which were among the most valuable in the world. By the early 20th century, sea otters had been hunted nearly to extinction, with only a few small populations surviving in remote locations. International protection arrived just in time, and since then, sea otter numbers have gradually recovered in some areas, though they remain far below historical levels. This recovery represents one of conservation's success stories, but it is incomplete. Many areas that once supported sea otters remain empty, and existing populations face ongoing threats from oil spills, pollution, disease, and conflict with fisheries. The sea otter's history reminds us both of humanity's capacity for destruction and of our ability to reverse course and repair some of the damage we have caused. Sea otters have little body fat, storing almost no energy reserves in adipose tissue the way seals and whales do. This lack of blubber makes them vulnerable to starvation during periods when food is scarce or when injury or illness prevents them from foraging effectively. An otter that goes without food for even a day or two begins to lose weight rapidly and may enter a downward spiral where weakness makes hunting more difficult, which leads to further weight loss and greater weakness. This vulnerability means that sea otter populations are sensitive to environmental changes that affect prey availability. If a disease wipes out clam populations, or if pollution reduces urchin numbers, otters may starve, even in areas that once supported them well. The lack of reserves also makes young otters particularly vulnerable during the learning period, when they are transitioning from mother's milk to solid food. Many pups die during this critical phase, unable to catch enough prey to sustain themselves before they master the necessary skills. The sea otter's teeth are strong and adapted for crushing hard-shelled prey, with broad molars designed to crack open urchins and crabs. The front teeth, or incisors, are less prominent than in many carnivores, reflecting the otter's reliance on its paws rather than its mouth for manipulating food. Unlike seals, which swallow prey whole, sea otters carefully remove shells and consume only the soft tissue inside, discarding the hard parts. This selective feeding maximizes caloric intake relative to the effort of consumption and digestion. The teeth wear down over the course of the otter's life, particularly in individuals that eat large quantities of hard-shelled prey. Old otters may have teeth worn nearly to the gum line, which can make feeding more difficult and contribute to declining health in elderly individuals. Despite this wear, the teeth generally remain functional throughout the otter's life, continuing to serve their crushing function even when substantially eroded. Sea otters are capable of complex problem-solving, demonstrating cognitive abilities that rival those of primates in some domains. Experiments have shown that otters can learn to associate symbols with specific outcomes, remember solutions to problems over long periods, and modify their behavior based on changing conditions. In the wild, this intelligence manifests in diverse hunting strategies, tool selection and use, and social navigation of complex relationships within otter groups. The brain of a sea otter is relatively large for its body size, with a well-developed cerebral cortex that supports advanced cognitive processing. This intelligence is not merely an interesting side note to the otter's biology, it is central to the animal's survival strategy, allowing it to exploit a wide range of prey species, adapt to varying environmental conditions, and thrive in a challenging marine habitat where survival demands constant innovation and flexibility. The sea otter population is structured differently in different locations, with some areas supporting territorial males who defend prime feeding grounds from rivals, while other areas have more fluid social systems where individuals move freely without defending fixed territories. These differences may relate to prey distribution, population density, or other ecological factors that vary from place to place. In general, males are more territorial than females, particularly during the breeding season, when access to females becomes a valuable resource. Territorial males patrol their areas and engage in displays and occasional fights with intruders, though serious injuries from these conflicts are relatively rare. Females move more freely, focusing their energy on foraging and raising pups, rather than on defending space. This sexual dimorphism in behavior reflects the different reproductive investments of males and females, and the varying strategies that best serve each sex's reproductive interests. Sea otters rest and sleep for significant portions of each day, recuperating from the energy expenditure of constant foraging and maintaining their high metabolic rate. Rest periods often occur after feeding sessions, with the otter grooming its fur thoroughly before settling down to float and doze. During rest, the otter's breathing becomes slower and more regular, and its body relaxes completely, swaying gently with the waves. The otter may cover its eyes with its paws or simply close them, drifting in a state of peaceful repose. These rest periods are essential for energy conservation and allow the otter to process and digest the large quantities of food it has consumed. The sight of sea otters sleeping peacefully on the water surface, sometimes holding hands to stay together, is one of the most serene images nature offers, a reminder of the simple pleasures of rest, safety, and companionship. The sea otter's nose is highly sensitive, capable of detecting scents both above and below water. On the surface, the otter uses its nose to investigate floating objects, identify other otters, and perhaps to detect threats. Underwater, scent becomes less useful, but the nose still closes tightly to prevent water from entering the nasal passages during dives. The nostrils are positioned at the tip of the snout, allowing the otter to breathe while most of its head remains submerged. After surfacing from a dive, an otter often exhales forcefully through its nose, clearing any water that may have entered and taking a deep breath before the next dive. The nose twitches and moves constantly when the otter is investigating something, part of the overall sensory assessment that includes whiskers, eyes, and paws. This multi-sensory approach to understanding the environment ensures that the otter gathers as much information as possible before making decisions about where to forage, how to interact with other otters, or whether to flee from potential danger. Sea otters create areas of intensive foraging activity that become known as feeding pits or excavations on the seafloor. When otters repeatedly dig for clams in the same area, they turn over sediment, expose buried prey, and create small depressions that can remain visible for weeks or months. These disturbances have ecological consequences, both positive and negative. The digging aerates sediment, releases nutrients, and creates habitat complexity that some organisms benefit from. It also disrupts the seafloor community, displacing organisms that prefer stable sediment and reducing prey availability for other predators. The cumulative effect of many otters foraging over time can substantially alter the structure of benthic communities, changing species composition and ecosystem function. This engineering role adds another dimension to the sea otter's ecological importance, demonstrating that its impact extends beyond direct predation to include physical modification of the habitat itself. The sea otter's hearing is acute, both above and below water, allowing it to detect sounds across a wide range of frequencies. Underwater, sound travels differently than in air, and the otter's auditory system is adapted to function in both media. The ears are small and streamlined, reducing drag while swimming, but they contain sophisticated structures that process sound waves and transmit information to the brain. Sea otters can hear the calls of other otters at considerable distances, allowing them to maintain acoustic contact even when visual contact is impossible. They likely also hear the sounds of boats, predators, and other environmental features, using this information to make decisions about where to go and what to do. The importance of hearing in sea otter ecology is not fully understood, but research suggests that increasing ocean noise from shipping and human activity may interfere with the otter's ability to communicate and detect important environmental cues. Sea otters exhibit individual personalities, with some individuals being bold and curious, while others are shy and cautious. These personality differences appear early in life and remain relatively stable as the otter matures. Bold otters are more likely to approach novel objects or unfamiliar animals, while cautious otters maintain greater distance and take fewer risks. Personality affects foraging success, social relationships, and survival, with different personality types being advantageous under different circumstances. In areas with heavy boat traffic, cautious otters may fare better by avoiding dangerous interactions with humans. In areas where novel food sources become available, bold otters may be first to exploit them, gaining a feeding advantage. The existence of stable personality differences in sea otters suggests that their behavior is not purely instinctive, but includes substantial individual variation that reflects each animal's unique history and genetic makeup. The relationship between sea otters and kelp forests is one of the most famous examples of a trophic cascade in ecology. Sea otters eat sea urchins, which are voracious grazers that consume kelp. When otters are present and urchin populations are controlled, kelp forests flourish, growing into dense underwater forests that provide habitat for hundreds of other species. When otters are absent, urchin populations explode, and the urchins can strip away all the kelp in an area, creating urchin barrens, rocky areas devoid of large algae, where biodiversity is greatly reduced. The return of sea otters to an area can reverse this process, with kelp forests recovering over time as urchin populations decline. This cascade demonstrates how a single predator at the top of a food web can influence the entire structure of an ecosystem, shaping not just prey populations, but the physical habitat itself. The sea otter's role as a keystone species has made it a focus of conservation biology and a symbol of the interconnectedness of natural systems. Sea otters are capable of forming memories that last for months or years, remembering the locations of productive foraging sites and returning to them repeatedly. Individual otters develop home ranges where they spend most of their time, becoming intimately familiar with every reef, kelp bed, and sandy patch within their territory. This spatial memory allows otters to forage efficiently, knowing where to find different types of prey in different seasons and conditions. Young otters learn their home ranges from their mothers, who guide them to the best feeding spots and teach them how to exploit each location. This knowledge transfer represents a form of culture, with information about the environment being passed between generations through learning rather than genetics. The accumulation of local knowledge over time may give experienced otters significant advantages over newcomers, explaining why otters often remain in the same general area throughout their lives, rather than wandering randomly in search of food. The sea otter's lungs are relatively large for its body size, allowing it to take in substantial amounts of oxygen before each dive. This oxygen is stored in the blood and tissues, as well as in the lungs themselves, providing the fuel for muscular activity during submersion. The otter's diving physiology includes adjustments to heart rate and blood flow that conserve oxygen for essential organs like the brain and heart, while temporarily reducing circulation to less critical tissues. These adaptations allow the otter to extend its dive time beyond what would otherwise be possible, though most dives remain relatively short compared to deep-diving marine mammals like seals and whales. The otter's diving strategy emphasizes frequent short dives rather than occasional deep ones, reflecting its foraging style and the depths at which most of its prey is found. This approach allows the otter to maintain a high rate of food collection throughout the day, without exhausting its oxygen stores or accumulating dangerous levels of carbon dioxide in its blood. Sea otters sometimes form feeding associations with seabirds, particularly gulls and crows, which follow foraging otters and steal scraps of food that the otters drop or discard. The birds learn to recognize actively feeding otters and position themselves nearby, waiting for opportunities to snatch a morsel. The otters generally tolerate this theft, as the amount of food lost to birds is minimal compared to what they consume themselves. In some cases, the relationship may even be beneficial to otters, as the bird's presence and behavior may help attract other otters to productive feeding areas, creating informal information networks about where food is abundant. These multi-species associations demonstrate the complex web of relationships that characterize marine ecosystems, where the activities of one species create opportunities and challenges for many others, all interacting in ways both competitive and cooperative. The molt cycle of a sea otter occurs gradually throughout the year, rather than in distinct seasonal sheds like many mammals. Old hairs fall out and new ones grow in continuously, maintaining the fur coat at constant density and quality. This continuous renewal is necessary because the otter depends absolutely on its fur for survival and cannot afford to have thin or patchy areas even temporarily. The energy cost of growing and maintaining such dense fur is substantial, adding to the otter's overall metabolic burden. The shed hairs float away on currents or sink to the seafloor, becoming part of the marine debris that accumulates in coastal waters. The constant hair loss also means that any otter you see is continually renewing itself, a living creature in perpetual transformation, maintaining its essential adaptations through ongoing biological processes that never pause or rest. Sea otters occasionally raid human fishing gear or shellfish farms, consuming commercially valuable species and causing economic conflict with fisheries. Otters may learn to associate fishing boats or aquaculture operations with easy food, becoming habituated to human presence and losing their natural wariness. This creates difficult management challenges, as otters are protected under various laws, but also cause real economic damage to people trying to make a living from the sea. Solutions to these conflicts require creativity and compromise, balancing the needs of both otters and humans in shared coastal spaces. Some approaches include modifying fishing gear to make it less accessible to otters, relocating problem individuals, or developing compensation programs for fishers who lose catch to otter predation. The existence of these conflicts reminds us that conservation does not occur in a vacuum, but must engage with human economic realities and find ways to coexist that are acceptable to all stakeholders. The sea otter's reproductive rate is relatively slow, with females producing at most one pup per year and often going longer between successful births. This low reproductive output makes sea otter populations vulnerable to decline, as losses cannot be quickly replaced by new births. Female otters invest enormous energy in each pup, nursing it for months and teaching it to forage over an extended period that can last up to 8 months. During this time, the mother's own survival is at risk, as she must feed both herself and her growing pup while maintaining all the normal metabolic demands of life in cold water. Some mothers die from exhaustion or starvation while caring for pups, a testament to the extreme parental investment that characterizes sea otter reproduction. The pups that do survive to independence carry forward their mother's genetic legacy and the knowledge she transmitted, ensuring that successful behaviors and traits pass to the next generation. Sea otters can regulate their buoyancy by adjusting the amount of air trapped in their fur. When an otter wants to dive, it expels some air from its coat by compressing the fur with its paws, or by simply compressing its body, allowing it to sink more easily. When it wants to float effortlessly at the surface, it blows air into the fur and fluffs it up, maximizing the trapped air volume. This ability to control buoyancy gives the otter flexibility in how it moves through the water column, allowing it to hover at mid-depth, rest on the surface, or dive to the bottom with equal facility. The buoyancy adjustment happens quickly and unconsciously, one more aspect of the otter's intimate understanding of its physical environment and its mastery of the medium in which it lives. The social structure of sea otter populations varies by sex and age, with adult males often occupying the best territories, while females and juveniles use overlapping home ranges in less contested areas. During breeding season, territorial males attempt to exclude other males while attracting females into their territories. Outside breeding season, social structure relaxes somewhat, and individuals of both sexes may raft together in mixed groups. Young males, who have not yet established territories, may form bachelor groups, associating with each other while waiting for opportunities to claim space of their own. These social dynamics create a constantly shifting landscape of relationships and spatial arrangements, with individual otters adjusting their behavior based on who else is present, what resources are available, and what time of year it is. Understanding these social patterns requires long-term observation and individual recognition, work that researchers have been conducting for decades in some sea otter populations. Sea otters groom their faces with particular attention, using both paws simultaneously to wash and fluff the facial fur. The face-washing motion looks remarkably human-like, as if the otter is trying to wake itself up or wipe away sleepiness. This grooming maintains the insulation around the otter's head, and also cleans the whiskers, ensuring they remain sensitive and functional. After eating, otters almost always groom their faces and heads thoroughly, removing any food particles that might mat the fur or attract parasites. The grooming ritual is methodical and complete, covering every accessible part of the body in a sequence that ensures nothing is missed. Watching an otter groom is hypnotic, the repetitive motions and obvious care, creating a meditation on the importance of maintenance, of constant attention to the small details that sustain life. The sea otter's blood contains unusually high levels of certain enzymes that help process the large amounts of food the animal consumes. These enzymes break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates rapidly, extracting nutrients that fuel the otter's metabolism. The liver plays a central role in this processing, functioning at a high rate to handle the constant influx of food and the waste products generated by intensive metabolism. The liver is proportionally large compared to that of other mammals, another adaptation to the demands of the otter's lifestyle. All of these internal processes occur invisibly, hidden beneath the fur and skin. But they are just as crucial to the otter's survival as its visible adaptations. The otter's body is a marvel of coordinated systems, each organ and tissue working in concert to maintain the delicate balance that keeps the animal alive and functioning in a challenging environment. Sea otters face threats from predators including sharks and killer whales, though predation rates vary considerably between locations. In some areas, predation is rare, and most otter deaths result from other causes. In other areas, particularly where great white sharks are common, shark attacks can be a significant source of mortality. Killer whales in some regions have learned to hunt sea otters, though otters are not a major part of the orca's diet. When threatened by a predator, an otter's best defense is usually to flee into thick kelp, where larger animals have difficulty maneuvering, or to haul out on rocks if available. The otter can also dive repeatedly, forcing an air-breathing predator to surface while the otter remains submerged. These defenses are not always successful, and some otters bear scars from close encounters with predators, testament to their survival in a dangerous ocean where vigilance and quick reactions make the difference between life and death. The sea otter's connection to the seafloor is constant and essential, as nearly all of its food comes from benthic habitats. The otter must dive repeatedly throughout the day, making hundreds of trips from surface to seafloor and back again, each dive a journey between two worlds. The surface is where the otter breathes, rests, eats, and socializes, basking in whatever sunlight penetrates the fog and clouds. The seafloor is where sustenance waits, hidden among rocks and buried in sediment, requiring effort and skill to find and extract. The otter spends its life moving between these realms, never fully belonging to either surface or depth, but inhabiting the boundary zone where both are accessible. This liminal existence defines the sea otter's ecology and shapes every aspect of its adaptation and behavior. Sea otters can sleep while floating at the surface, entering a state of rest that may include actual sleep with reduced brain activity, or may be more like drowsing with maintained awareness of surroundings. The exact nature of otter sleep is not fully understood, as detailed sleep studies are difficult to conduct on wild marine mammals. What is clear is that otters need rest and spend significant time in inactive states, where breathing slows and eyes close. During these rest periods, the otter is vulnerable to drifting on currents, which is why kelp wrapping and paw-holding behaviors are so important. These anchoring techniques ensure that sleeping otters remain in safe areas, rather than drifting into shipping lanes, onto rocky shores, or out to open ocean where they might be unable to return. The ability to sleep safely while floating is another adaptation that allows the otter to remain entirely marine, never needing to come ashore for rest as seals and sea lions do. The sea otter's skin produces oils that help waterproof the fur and maintain its insulating properties. These oils spread across the fur during grooming, creating a thin layer that causes water to bead and run off, rather than penetrating to the skin. The production and distribution of these oils is a constant process, one more biological task that the otter's body performs without conscious direction. If the oil production is disrupted by illness, injury, or exposure to pollutants, the fur loses its waterproofing and the otter begins to lose body heat. This is one reason why sea otters are so vulnerable to petroleum spills. Crude oil dissolves the natural oils and destroys the fur's structure, leaving the otter unable to thermoregulate even if it appears physically uninjured. The subtlety of this oil system, invisible to the naked eye but absolutely critical for survival, reminds us how finely balanced the otter's adaptations are, and how easily that balance can be disrupted by human activities. Sea otters make use of the entire water column in their habitat, from the surface where they float and rest, down to the seafloor where they forage. The middle layers of water are transit zones, passed through quickly during ascents and descents, but not lingered in. This vertical use of space means that sea otters experience their environment in 3 dimensions, rather than the essentially 2-dimensional existence of many terrestrial animals. The otter must be aware of what is above it, below it, and around it in all directions, maintaining spatial awareness in a medium where there are few fixed reference points. This 3-dimensional lifestyle requires sophisticated neural processing and spatial memory, cognitive abilities that the otter's large brain provides. The freedom of movement that water allows becomes both an opportunity and a challenge, offering access to resources spread throughout the water column but requiring constant attention to position and orientation. The whiskers of a sea otter are not just simple hairs, but are highly specialized sensory organs with their own blood supply and nerve connections. Each whisker is embedded in tissue that contains sensory receptors capable of detecting minute deflections of the whisker shaft. When a whisker touches something or bends in response to water currents, these receptors fire and send signals to the brain, creating a tactile map of the otter's immediate surroundings. The whiskers are especially important during night dives or in turbid water where visibility is minimal. In these conditions, the otter essentially feels its way across the seafloor, using its whiskers to detect the shapes and textures that indicate prey. The whiskers are also used to examine captured prey, helping the otter determine how best to open shells or whether a particular item is worth eating. This sophisticated touch sense supplements vision and makes the otter a more effective forager than it could be with sight alone. Sea otters engage in what appears to be courtship behavior, with males and females interacting in ways that include chasing, wrestling, and mutual grooming. Male sea otters can be aggressive during mating, sometimes biting the female's nose or face to maintain contact during copulation. These bites can leave scars that persist for weeks, visible marks of reproduction that researchers can use to assess breeding activity in a population. The injuries are generally superficial and heal without lasting damage, but they do cause temporary harm to the female. This aggressive mating behavior is one of the less charming aspects of sea otter biology, a reminder that wild animals do not always conform to human standards of gentle behavior. After mating, the male and female typically separate, with the male showing no interest in the resulting offspring. The entire burden of pregnancy, birth, and pup rearing falls on the female, who must manage these demands while continuing to feed herself and maintain her body temperature in cold water. The population genetics of sea otters reveals patterns created by the near-extinction event of the fur trade era. The surviving populations were so small and isolated that genetic diversity was drastically reduced, creating a genetic bottleneck whose effects persist today. Modern sea otter populations show less genetic variation than they once did, making them potentially more vulnerable to disease, environmental change, and inbreeding problems. As populations recover and expand, they gradually rebuild some genetic diversity through mutation and the mixing of previously isolated groups. But the process is slow, and the original diversity may never be fully restored. This genetic legacy of historical hunting remains written in the DNA of every living sea otter, a molecular memory of near extinction that affects the species' ability to adapt to future challenges. Sea otters are sometimes observed engaging in apparently playful interactions with other species, including seals, seabirds, and even occasionally approaching boats or divers with curiosity. These interactions rarely seem to have obvious survival value and may represent either misdirected social behavior or genuine playfulness directed at unlikely targets. Young otters are particularly prone to curious investigations of novel objects and animals, approaching things their mothers would avoid and learning through experience what is worth investigating and what is better left alone. This exploratory tendency helps young otters learn about their environment, but also exposes them to risks, including potential injury from animals that respond aggressively to otter approaches. The balance between curiosity and caution must be learned, and not all young otters learn it successfully. Some become too bold for their own good, while others remain too fearful to exploit all available resources. The sea otter's jaw muscles are powerful, capable of exerting significant force when crushing hard-shelled prey. This bite force, combined with strong teeth, allows the otter to crack open prey that would be inaccessible to animals with weaker jaws. The jaw structure is adapted to produce maximum crushing force at the rear of the mouth, where the molars are located. The otter positions prey between these molars and bites down repeatedly until the shell fractures. The crunching sound of an otter breaking open urchins or crabs can sometimes be heard above the water surface, a rhythmic cracking that punctuates the quiet sounds of waves and wind. This acoustic signature of feeding is one more way to detect otter presence, a sound that tells of sustenance being extracted from the sea through application of force, tool use, and persistent effort. Sea otters contribute to carbon sequestration through their role in maintaining kelp forests, which are among the most productive ecosystems on Earth. Kelp absorbs carbon dioxide from the water as it grows, incorporating carbon into its tissues. When kelp dies, some of this carbon sinks to the deep sea floor where it may be buried and sequestered for long periods. By controlling urchin populations and allowing kelp forests to thrive, sea otters indirectly enhance this carbon storage process. The magnitude of this effect is substantial enough that some scientists have proposed including sea otter restoration in climate change mitigation strategies. The otter's climate benefits are indirect and operate through complex ecological pathways, but they are real and measurable. This adds yet another dimension to the sea otter's importance, linking local conservation of a charismatic mammal to global processes that affect the entire planet. The sea otter's paws leave distinctive tracks when the animal comes ashore, though such landings are rare. The front paw prints show 5 distinct toe pads with claw marks, while the hind feet leave larger, more elongated prints that show webbing between the toes. These tracks tell a story of an animal awkward on land, dragging its body between paw placements rather than walking efficiently. The tracks also reveal the otter's size and sometimes its direction of travel, providing information that researchers can use to document rare haul-out events. In most cases, sea otters that come ashore are either sick, injured, or fleeing immediate danger in the water. Healthy otters remain at sea, where their adaptations give them grace and capability, rather than the clumsy vulnerability they experience on land. Sea otters have been observed using a variety of tools beyond simple rocks, including glass bottles, floating wood, and other human-made objects when these are available. The otter's criterion for a good tool seems to be primarily about having a hard surface against which to strike prey, and any solid object of appropriate size can serve. This flexibility in tool selection demonstrates that otters understand the functional properties of tools rather than being rigidly programmed to use specific objects. An otter that has never seen a glass bottle can recognize it as a potential tool and use it successfully, showing that tool use is based on general principles rather than specific training. This cognitive flexibility is yet another indication of sea otter intelligence and adaptability. The sea otter's body shape creates relatively high drag in water compared to streamlined animals like seals or dolphins. The broad, flat form that works well for floating creates resistance when swimming rapidly. The otter compensates for this with powerful muscles and efficient movement patterns, but it will never be as fast as more streamlined marine mammals. This trade-off between floating ability and swimming efficiency reflects the otter's ecological niche. It needs to float comfortably for long periods while feeding and resting, and it needs to dive to moderate depths in shallow water. But it does not need to chase fast-moving prey or migrate across ocean basins. The otter's body is optimized for its specific lifestyle, accepting limitations in some areas to achieve excellence in others. This specialization is both a strength and a vulnerability, allowing the otter to thrive in appropriate habitat while limiting its ability to adapt if conditions change dramatically. Sea otters are sensitive to disturbance from boats, aircraft, and other human activities that occur in their habitat. Frequent disturbance can cause otters to abandon preferred resting areas, disrupt feeding activities, and reduce reproductive success. Some areas with high boat traffic show lower otter densities than similar areas with less disturbance, suggesting that human activity effectively excludes otters from otherwise suitable habitat. Managing this disturbance requires establishing protected areas where human activity is restricted and educating recreational users about how to observe otters responsibly without causing stress. The goal is to allow humans to enjoy the presence of otters while minimizing impacts on the animal's behavior and well-being. This balance between access and protection is central to modern wildlife conservation and requires ongoing effort to maintain. The sea otter's skeleton is relatively light compared to land mammals of similar size, an adaptation that reduces the energy cost of moving through water. The bones are strong enough to support the otter's body and anchor powerful muscles, but are not as dense or heavy as terrestrial mammal bones. This lighter skeleton contributes to the otter's overall buoyancy and swimming efficiency, allowing it to move through water with less effort. The skull is broad and robust, supporting powerful jaw muscles and protecting the brain. The limb bones are relatively short and thick, adapted for the powerful strokes needed for swimming rather than for running or walking. Every aspect of the skeleton reflects the otter's marine lifestyle, from the proportions of different bones to the arrangement of muscle attachment points. The skeleton is a framework around which the rest of the otter's adaptations are built, the foundation that supports all other structures and functions. The sea otter's immune system must defend against a variety of pathogens encountered in the marine environment, including bacteria, viruses, and parasites that thrive in coastal waters. The immune system consists of specialized cells and proteins that circulate through the blood and tissues, identifying and destroying foreign organisms before they can cause disease. Despite these defenses, sea otters are vulnerable to various infections, some of which have caused significant mortality events in certain populations. Diseases can spread more easily through dense aggregations of otters, and environmental stresses like pollution or food scarcity can weaken immune function, making individuals more susceptible to infection. The health of sea otter populations depends not just on adequate food and habitat, but on maintaining conditions that support strong immune responses and minimize disease transmission. Understanding sea otter disease ecology has become increasingly important as populations recover and face new challenges from emerging pathogens and changing environmental conditions. Sea otters modify their behavior in response to changing weather conditions, seeking shelter in protected bays and coves during storms, and spreading into more exposed areas when seas are calm. Strong winds and large waves make foraging difficult and increase the energy cost of maintaining position. So otters often wait out severe weather in calmer waters, where they can rest more efficiently. The thick kelp forests that otters favor provide some protection from wind and waves, creating relatively calm conditions even when surrounding waters are rough. This relationship between otters and kelp is mutually beneficial. The otters protect the kelp from urchins, and the kelp provides shelter for the otters. During intense storms, some otters may temporarily haul out on rocks or beaches, choosing the discomfort of land over the danger of being battered by waves. These weather-related movements demonstrate the otter's awareness of environmental conditions and its ability to make decisions that enhance survival during challenging periods. The lifespan of a sea otter in the wild averages around 10 to 15 years, though some individuals live longer. Females generally outlive males, perhaps because males expend more energy on territorial defense and aggressive interactions. The oldest recorded sea otters have reached their early 20s. Remarkable longevity for an animal with such a high metabolic rate and intense lifestyle. As otters age, they show signs of wear similar to aging. In other mammals, teeth become worn, fur may thin slightly, and movements become less vigorous. Older otters may shift to easier prey or to foraging areas with less competition, conserving energy, and adapting their behavior to their declining physical abilities. Eventually, age or illness weakens the otter, to the point where it can no longer forage effectively, and it dies from starvation, hypothermia, or disease. The body sinks or washes ashore, returning its nutrients to the ecosystem and completing the otter's participation in the cycles of life and death that characterize all natural systems. Sea otters sometimes rest in groups that include individuals of different ages and both sexes, creating rafts where social bonds can form and information can be exchanged. These aggregations are not random but reflect social preferences, with some individuals consistently associating with specific companions. Mothers with pups often raft together, perhaps benefiting from safety in numbers or from opportunities to observe other mothers' techniques. Young males may raft together while learning to forage independently, forming temporary associations that dissolve as they mature and begin competing for territories. The social dynamics within rafts are subtle and complex, involving hierarchies, affiliations, and conflicts that play out through small interactions and adjustments in position. Watching a raft of otters reveals this social complexity, as individuals approach or avoid each other, groom themselves or companions, and constantly monitor their neighbors' activities. The sea otter's ability to regulate its body temperature depends on maintaining a delicate balance between heat production through metabolism and heat loss to the environment. The cold water constantly draws heat away from the otter's body, requiring continuous metabolic activity to replace that heat. The otter's high metabolic rate generates warmth as a byproduct of cellular respiration, with muscles and organs producing heat as they function. This heat must be distributed throughout the body to prevent dangerous cooling of extremities, which is where the circulatory system's countercurrent heat exchangers become crucial. The entire thermoregulatory system operates automatically, adjusting blood flow, metabolic rate, and behavior to maintain core temperature within narrow limits. When the system fails due to damaged fur, prolonged food shortage, or extreme environmental conditions, the otter's body temperature drops, leading to hypothermia and death. The precision required for this thermal balancing act is remarkable, a testament to the fine-tuning that evolution has achieved over millions of years. Sea otters produce vocalizations that vary by context, with different sounds used for different situations. A mother separated from her pup produces distinctive distress calls that carry across the water, urgent cries that continue until reunion occurs. Pups call constantly to their mothers, maintaining acoustic contact that helps them stay together. Adult otters engaged in aggressive encounters produce harsh, chattering sounds, while contented otters resting or grooming may coo softly to themselves. These vocalizations add an auditory dimension to sea otter life, creating a soundscape that includes not just the natural sounds of wind and waves, but the voices of the otters themselves. Learning to distinguish different otter calls allows observers to interpret what they're seeing, understanding whether otters are relaxed or stressed, social or solitary, simply by listening to the sounds they make. The sea otter's front paws are remarkably sensitive, with nerve endings densely packed in the paw pads that allow fine tactile discrimination. When manipulating food or tools, the otter can feel subtle differences in texture, temperature, and hardness, using this information to adjust its handling techniques. The paws work together with remarkable coordination, one holding while the other manipulates, or both, working in concert to perform complex tasks. This manual dexterity approaches that of primates in some ways, though the otter's paws lack opposable thumbs and have different structural constraints. The evolution of such dexterous paws in a marine mammal is unusual and reflects the importance of tool use and food manipulation in sea otter ecology. These paws are instruments of survival, extensions of the otter's will that allow it to extract food from shells that would otherwise be impenetrable. Sea otters occasionally share food with companions, though this behavior is not common and usually occurs between mothers and pups or between associated adults. An otter that has caught more food than it can immediately eat might tolerate a nearby otter taking some of the surplus, or a mother might deliberately give pieces of food to her pup. These sharing events demonstrate some level of social tolerance and perhaps even altruism, behaviors that reduce individual fitness in favor of others' welfare. The evolutionary origins and significance of such sharing remain debated, but its existence suggests that sea otter social relationships include cooperative elements beyond simple aggregation for safety or information transfer. The bonds between some otters appear to transcend pure self-interest, creating relationships characterized by mutual support and tolerance. The sea otter's eyes contain adaptations for seeing in different light conditions. From bright surface sunshine to the dim light at depth, the pupils can contract to tiny points in bright light, or dilate widely in darkness, adjusting the amount of light entering the eye. The retina contains both rods for low-light vision and cones for color vision, though the exact color perception abilities of sea otters remain incompletely understood. The eyes are protected by eyelids that close during sleep and by a nictitating membrane that can sweep across the eye surface to remove debris. Vision is important for navigation, predator detection, and social interactions, though it takes a secondary role to touch when foraging in murky water or at depth. The integration of visual information with input from other senses creates a complete perceptual picture that guides the otter's decisions and actions. Sea otters face increasing challenges from climate change, which affects their habitat and prey in complex ways. Warming ocean temperatures alter the distribution and abundance of kelp and the invertebrates that otters eat. Changes in storm patterns and intensity affect foraging conditions and pup survival. Ocean acidification may weaken the shells of prey species, potentially making them easier to open, but also reducing their nutritional value and abundance. Sea level rise gradually changes the character of coastal habitats, potentially reducing the shallow water foraging grounds that otters depend upon. These climate-related changes compound other threats like pollution and disease, creating a challenging future for sea otter populations. How well otters adapt to these changing conditions will determine whether populations continue to recover or begin declining again, unable to keep pace with the rate of environmental change. The sea otter's position as a keystone species means that its presence or absence has disproportionate effects on ecosystem structure and function. This ecological importance has made sea otter conservation a priority in many regions, with substantial resources devoted to monitoring populations and protecting habitat. The success of sea otter recovery in some areas demonstrates that conservation efforts can work, that species pushed to the edge of extinction can rebound if given protection and habitat. This success story provides hope and inspiration for conservation work focused on other threatened species. At the same time, the challenges that remain limited range, slow reproduction. Ongoing threats remind us that conservation is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing commitment that requires sustained effort and resources across generations. Sea otters occasionally interact with human swimmers and divers, sometimes approaching out of curiosity or simply continuing their normal activities in the presence of people. These encounters can be magical for humans, offering close views of wild animals going about their daily lives. However, such interactions must be managed carefully to avoid habituating otters to human presence or causing them stress. Responsible wildlife viewing guidelines recommend maintaining distance, never feeding wild otters, and avoiding behaviors that disrupt their natural activities. When humans follow these guidelines, both species can share the coastal environment with minimal conflict. When guidelines are ignored, problems develop. Otters may become aggressive when expecting food, may abandon areas due to harassment, or may suffer injury from well-meaning but misguided human contact. The sea otter's dependence on clean water makes it vulnerable to oil spills and other pollution events. Even small amounts of petroleum can destroy the fur's insulating properties, and otters exposed to oil often die from hypothermia, even if rescued and cleaned. Major oil spills can devastate local otter populations, killing dozens or hundreds of individuals in a matter of days. The effects extend beyond immediate mortality, as surviving otters face reduced prey availability in contaminated areas and may suffer long-term health effects from exposure to toxic compounds. Oil spill response for sea otters is challenging and expensive, requiring specialized facilities and trained personnel to capture, clean, and rehabilitate affected animals. Despite best efforts, many oiled otters do not survive rehabilitation, and those that do may face reduced life expectancy. The vulnerability of sea otters to oil spills makes oil tanker traffic and offshore drilling particularly concerning in areas where otters are recovering or attempting to recolonize. Sea otters engage in extensive grooming after feeding, removing food particles and redistributing oils throughout the fur. This post-feeding grooming is as much a part of the meal as the eating itself, an essential ritual that maintains the otter's insulation. The grooming includes attention to areas the otter cannot easily reach, with remarkable flexibility allowing the otter to twist and contort its body to clean its back and sides. The entire grooming sequence follows a predictable pattern, suggesting that it is partly instinctive, while also being refined through learning and practice. Young otters must develop effective grooming techniques, and those that fail to groom properly face serious consequences. The importance of grooming in sea otter life cannot be overstated. It is as vital as feeding, as necessary as breathing, a constant requirement that never ends for as long as the otter lives. The sea otter's gut contains communities of microorganisms that help digest food and synthesize essential nutrients. This microbiome varies between individuals and populations, potentially reflecting differences in diet and environmental conditions. The gut bacteria break down food components that the otter's own enzymes cannot process, extracting additional nutrients and energy from prey items. The health of this microbial community affects overall otter health, influencing digestion, immune function, and potentially even behavior. Disturbances to the microbiome from disease, stress, or exposure to pollutants can have cascading effects on the otter's well-being. Understanding the sea otter microbiome is an emerging area of research that may provide insights into otter health and potential interventions to support struggling populations. Sea otters create areas of disturbed sediment on the seafloor through their digging activities, and these disturbances persist as visible features of the benthic landscape. From above, these feeding pits appear as patches of lighter sediment, where overburden has been removed and prey extracted. The pits gradually fill in over time as currents redistribute sediment, but fresh pits are constantly being created by foraging otters. The density of feeding pits in an area reflects otter abundance and foraging intensity, providing researchers with a way to assess otter impacts on benthic communities. These physical modifications of habitat represent one more way that sea otters shape their environment, adding to their role as ecosystem engineers, whose presence fundamentally alters the character of coastal marine ecosystems. The sea otter's evolution over millions of years has produced a suite of adaptations that work together as an integrated system. Each individual trait, the dense fur, the dexterous paws, the high metabolism, makes sense only in the context of the others. The traits are interdependent, with the loss of any one potentially compromising the function of the rest. This integration means that sea otters are highly specialized, superbly adapted to their specific ecological niche, but potentially vulnerable to environmental changes that require different adaptations. The evolutionary path that led to modern sea otters involved countless small changes, each one tested by natural selection and either preserved or discarded based on its effects on survival and reproduction. The otter we see today is the current result of this ongoing process, a work in progress that continues to change, however slowly, in response to environmental pressures. Sea otters communicate through body language and postures that convey information about their internal states and intentions. An otter, floating relaxedly with limbs spread wide, sends a different message than one with body tense and head raised alertly. The positioning of paws, the angle of the head, the speed of movements, all contribute to a visual language that other otters can read and interpret. Young otters learn this language by observing adults and through trial and error in their own social interactions. The ability to read and respond appropriately to social signals is important for avoiding conflicts, forming beneficial associations, and navigating the complex social landscape of otter society. This nonverbal communication supplements vocal signals and creates a rich communicative system that operates through multiple sensory channels simultaneously. The sea otter's relationship with its environment is intimate and immediate, with the animal constantly receiving sensory information about water temperature, current direction, prey availability, and the presence of other organisms. This information flows through the otter's sensory systems: vision, hearing, touch, smell, taste, and is integrated in the brain to create a unified perception of the world. The otter responds to this perception with behaviors that maximize survival and reproductive success, adjusting its actions moment by moment based on changing conditions. This responsiveness gives the otter flexibility, allowing it to thrive in a dynamic environment where conditions vary unpredictably. The otter does not merely exist in its environment. It participates actively in it, both shaping and being shaped by the coastal ecosystem it calls home. Sea otters sometimes rest in what appears to be family groups, with mothers, pups, and sometimes juvenile offspring from previous years associating together. These family bonds seem stronger in females than in males, with daughters sometimes remaining near their mothers even after becoming independent. Males typically disperse farther from their birth areas once they mature, seeking territories and mating opportunities elsewhere. These differences in dispersal patterns between sexes affect population genetics and the rate at which otters recolonize empty habitat. Females moving shorter distances create local population growth, while males dispersing longer distances establish genetic connections between populations and carry the potential to colonize distant empty ranges. The interplay between these male and female strategies shapes the overall pattern of sea otter recovery and range expansion. The sea otter's kidneys process large volumes of fluid, removing waste products from the blood while conserving essential salts and nutrients. The kidneys must deal with the challenge of living in salt water, which tends to dehydrate marine animals if they drink it. Sea otters obtain most of their water from their prey rather than by drinking seawater, and their kidneys efficiently excrete excess salt when seawater is ingested. This osmoregulatory system maintains proper salt and water balance in the otter's body, preventing dangerous imbalances that could disrupt cellular function. The kidneys work constantly, producing urine that is expelled into the sea, where it disperses quickly. This waste adds nitrogen and other nutrients to coastal waters, another small way that otters participate in nutrient cycling within their ecosystem. Sea otters are capable of learning from experience, modifying their behavior based on successes and failures in foraging, social interactions, and responses to threats. An otter that tries to eat a particular prey species and finds it distasteful may avoid that species in the future. An otter that discovers a particularly productive foraging area may return to it repeatedly. This learning ability allows otters to adapt to local conditions and to improve their efficiency over time. Experienced otters are generally more successful foragers than young ones, not just because of greater physical ability, but because of accumulated knowledge about where to find food, how to process different prey, and when conditions are favorable for hunting. This experiential learning represents individual adaptation occurring within a lifetime, complementing the genetic adaptation that occurs across generations through natural selection. The sea otter's vocal repertoire includes sounds that humans cannot hear without specialized equipment, as some otter vocalizations extend into ultrasonic frequencies beyond the range of human hearing. The function of these ultrasonic calls is not fully understood, but they may serve communication purposes that remain invisible to human observers. The existence of sounds we cannot detect reminds us how limited our direct perception of otter life is, how much of their experience occurs in sensory modalities that we can only infer and measure indirectly. The otter's world is richer and more complex than we can fully appreciate, filled with signals and stimuli that shape behavior in ways we are only beginning to understand. Each advance in our knowledge reveals new complexities, new questions, new appreciation for these remarkable animals and the lives they lead. Sea otters contribute to local economies through ecotourism, with people traveling specifically to see wild otters in their natural habitat. Tour operators offer boat trips to otter viewing areas, kayak tours through kelp forests, and shore-based viewing opportunities from scenic overlooks. This tourism generates revenue for coastal communities and creates economic incentives for otter conservation. People who see otters in the wild often become passionate advocates for their protection, supporting conservation organizations and policies that benefit otters and their habitat. The economic value of living otters far exceeds their value as fur or as fishing competitors, a fact that has helped shift attitudes in some areas from hostility to appreciation. This economic argument complements ethical and ecological reasons for conservation, creating multiple justifications for protecting sea otters that appeal to different stakeholders and values. The sea otter's brain processes information from multiple sensory systems simultaneously, integrating visual, tactile, auditory, and chemical inputs to create a unified perception of the environment. This sensory integration occurs in specialized brain regions where information from different senses converges and is compared, allowing the otter to make more accurate assessments than any single sense could provide. When foraging, the otter combines what it sees, feels, hears, and perhaps smells to decide where to search and how to process captured prey. This multisensory approach to understanding the world is common among mammals, but is particularly well developed in sea otters, whose complex lifestyle demands sophisticated cognitive processing. The brain that enables these abilities is energy hungry, consuming a significant portion of the otter's metabolic output. But the investment is worthwhile because it enables the flexible, intelligent behavior that characterizes this species. Sea otters maintain territories or home ranges that vary in size depending on resource availability, with smaller ranges in areas where prey is abundant and larger ranges where food is sparse. The boundaries of these ranges are not fixed lines, but rather zones of gradual transition where use by neighboring otters overlaps. An otter knows its range intimately, having explored every reef and kelp bed within it through repeated foraging trips. This spatial knowledge allows efficient exploitation of resources, with the otter knowing where to find different prey types in different seasons and conditions. The home range becomes part of the otter's identity, the familiar landscape where it has succeeded and failed, where it has eaten and rested, where perhaps it has mated and raised young. Displacement from a home range is stressful and dangerous, forcing the otter to forage in unfamiliar areas where it lacks local knowledge and may face competition from established residents. The sea otter's breath is visible on cold mornings as mist or vapor, the warm, moist air from its lungs condensing when it meets cold air. This visible breathing becomes a marker of life, each exhale a confirmation that the otter continues its metabolic dance, continues to burn fuel and generate warmth and extract energy from food. The rate of breathing varies with activity level, rapid and shallow after a long dive or during intense activity, slower and deeper during rest. Watching an otter breathe connects observer to animal, reminding us that we share the fundamental need for oxygen, the same respiratory chemistry that powers all mammalian life. The breath that mists in morning air is the same breath that has sustained mammals for hundreds of millions of years, an ancient rhythm that the otter inherits and passes on, generation after generation. Sea otters face an uncertain future in an ocean increasingly dominated by human activity. Climate change, pollution, disease, habitat loss, and direct human disturbance all threaten otter populations to varying degrees. The challenges are daunting, but they are not insurmountable. With continued conservation effort, adequate protection, and public support, sea otter populations can continue to recover and may eventually reoccupy much of their historical range. The species has demonstrated remarkable resilience, bouncing back from near extinction when given the opportunity. This resilience gives reason for hope, suggesting that sea otters will continue to grace the coastal waters of the North Pacific for generations to come, floating on their backs among the kelp, cracking shells on their bellies, holding hands while they sleep, living their improbable lives at the boundary between sea and air. The sea otter exists as itself, without concern for human observation or interpretation. It hunts, eats, rests, and reproduces according to imperatives shaped by millions of years of evolution. It does not know it is endangered, or that humans debate its value and work to protect or exploit it. It simply lives, moment to moment, dive by dive, meal by meal. The otter's lack of awareness of its own significance makes its survival no less important. The loss of sea otters would diminish the world, regardless of whether the otters themselves understand their value. Their existence is its own justification, requiring no further argument or defense. They are part of the living planet, threads in the intricate web that connects all life, and their persistence enriches the world in ways both measurable and ineffable. Sea otters remind us that nature's solutions to survival challenges are often elegant and unexpected. The dense fur rather than blubber, the tool use, the keystone role in ecosystems. Each adaptation tells a story of natural selection, working with available materials to produce function and beauty. The otter is not designed by any conscious intelligence, but is shaped by the simple mechanics of variation and survival. Individuals with advantageous traits, leaving more offspring until entire populations carry those traits. This blind process has produced an animal that delights human observers, inspires conservation efforts, and anchors entire ecosystems. The otter's beauty is not intentional. It is simply what works, what survives, what propagates itself successfully through time. Yet that accidental beauty moves us deeply, connecting us to the natural world and to the evolutionary processes that shape all life. And now the sea otters fade behind your thoughts. We've drifted through 100 quiet truths about these gentle creatures who float among the kelp. From their impossibly dense fur to their remarkable intelligence, from their tool use to their role in shaping entire ecosystems, you are connected to this world. The same oxygen that the sea otter breathes fills your lungs now. The same elements that form its body form yours. The same evolutionary processes that shaped the otter have shaped every living thing. We are all participants in the great unfolding of life on Earth. All temporary arrangements of matter that persist for a while before dissolving back into the cycles that gave us form. Tonight, as you rest, sea otters continue their patient work in cold Pacific waters. They wrap themselves in kelp and float on gentle swells. They crack open shells and search through darkness for food. They hold their pups close and groom their precious fur. And you are safe, warm, resting in a world full of wonder. A world where otters still swim, and kelp forests still sway, and the rhythm of waves continues, as it has for countless ages. If you're still awake, go ahead and watch the next chapter. Sleep well and dream softly. Good night.